Welcome, Sterling, Eva. Great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. How are you
It's
doing?
our pleasure.
How are
Thanks.
you guys doing?
Doing really well down here in Bisbee.
So I'm going to start off by just apologizing for my mess on the other night, and I'm so happy that you're able to join us now, and we're able to get this interview together. So it's really great to see you guys. You guys are looking like you're doing really well.
We're doing great. It's been a ton of fun. The weather is beautiful. Reservations are starting to pick up after a slow tourism season. And
I just wanted to ask you guys, how are you managing down there? Is everything okay? Is the motel open?
Yeah, we're considered an essential business in the state of Arizona, so we never had to close. That said, with the stay-at-home orders, business has dropped off quite a bit. But we still continue to serve our guests and have people coming and going every day. We do clean our rooms extra good. We give them 24 hours to rest until we go in there and clean them. And because we have 7 different small rooms here, everybody that stays here is sort of isolated from any of the other guests. So they've got their privacy and that. And it just seems like it's working out pretty well.
Okay, before we get into too much on the motel side of this, I really want to talk to you guys a bit about your backgrounds because you're coming to the motel industry. Well, as most people actually who come to the hospitality industry don't actually have a hospitality background, but you're coming into the motel industry from two very unique perspectives. Um, Sterling, let me start with you. Everybody knows you for your work in backcountry discovery routes. An award-winning filmmaker, and then you meet Eva. Tell me this first. Let's tell me the story of how you guys met. Let's start there.
Okay, well, that's one of my favorite stories to tell. And it involves motorcycles and a week in the desert. So I was showing a backcountry discovery route film a few years ago in Las Vegas. And it was a premiere and it was in the evening and we had a little expo going on with some other motorcycle vendors and Eva was there working at one of the booths. And I met her before the show and she sat next to me during the movie and we watched the movie and then a few of us went out that evening and had one of those classic Las Vegas nights that you barely remember. And the next day, we both realized that we had to go to another event that was a few miles away in Death Valley. And so we road tripped over to Death Valley the next day. I was driving my van. Eva was on her motorcycle. And we did that event. It was a Backcountry Discovery Routes fundraiser, and it took place over the whole weekend. And so by the time that event ended, Eva and I had spent an entire week together. And that's where it all started.
You know what I love about that story is the fact that I had asked Eva that same story, and she told me the exact same story. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eva. But you have the exact same story, and 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 I know that Sterling wasn't in the room when I was asking you.
means it's true. I always say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, except for me and Sterling. And so we met there and then had our first date that was a week long, and we've been together ever since.
I absolutely love that, guys. And so tell me about now, Eva. You're from Flagstaff. Sterling, you were hailing from Washington State. How did you guys decide to descend on Bisbee? Tell me a little bit more about your selection of Bisbee as a place to settle together.
Well, I kind of discovered Bisbee maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I was down here filming the Arizona Backcountry Discovery Route. And that route starts about 25 miles from here. And so that was the first time I came through Bisbee, and it caught my attention. I thought it was a really cool, funky little artsy, historic town down in the mountains of southern Arizona. And then when I met Eva a few years ago and realized that we wanted to be together, it was easier for me to move down to the desert than it was for her to move up to Washington. So that's what I did. I moved down to Flagstaff with her. And the whole time I was living there, I kept saying, honey, let's go down to Bisbee. Let's go down to Bisbee. And so I finally brought Eva down here one day, and she really liked Bisbee. And we decided, maybe we'd find a little house or a second house, buy one of these old miners' cottages and fix it up. And in the process of looking for a house, we found a motel.
I absolutely love that. Um, Eva, you come from a very different background. You had your own notoriety. You were I don't want to use the term contestant. You were on Naked and Afraid. I'm not sure it's a contestant, but you survived. You're a survivalist by nature. Um, how do you refer to that?
A
How would you
survivalist. So
a
I've been on Naked and
survivalist?
Afraid 3 times, but that doesn't really have much to do with my background in general, other than the fact that I taught primitive skills in wilderness survival for a decade, all across the country in a variety of different environments. But most of my work is in event planning with Overland Expo. I have my own event planning company, and I have a fairly long parallel history in restaurants and bars. So I've got the service industry background, a survival background. I do a fair amount of graphic design and event planning, and somehow it all works really well together for the hospitality industry.
Well, absolutely. Especially having worked in the hospitality industry for as many years as I have, I can absolutely guarantee you survivalist skills are very, very important. Um, Especially when you have to become pretty ingenious at sometimes to figure out some guest solutions. All that said, um, it also serves you well in your capacity as in your capacity for your passion, which is adventure motorcycle riding, doesn't it?
I would say 100%. I feel like motorcycling has been one of the most consistent themes for our entire relationship. It's one of the most important things that each of us does, and we independently somehow work in the peripheries of that industry while running the motel. So we both have our day jobs here, Sterling doing film production and me doing event planning. And we're both sort of engaged in the power sports industry, specifically in the motorcycle world.
Okay, I'm going
Really natural to for us to combine the motorcycling with the motel. We just thought, let's make this a motorcycle destination because we're motorcyclists. We know what motorcyclists expect and want, and we have the information. We can point them out rides and routes and where to go, and it just works out really well.
Eva, I want to ask you one more question because you just touched on something that I wanted to bring up. I'm curious about because you organized the Overland Expo that was scheduled to take place, and I think you postponed it, didn't you? What's going on with Overland Expo?
Yeah, so Overland Expo, as of this year, we have 3 big events, and the first one was supposed to be on the weekend of May 16th. We've postponed that to the end of July, and then we have another one, a new show at the end of August, and then our East Coast show in Virginia, which is in October. So as of now, all systems go for everything Overland Expo, and to tide people over, we are doing a virtual Overland Expo West on Saturday, May 16th. So that's going to be super cool. It's free for everybody. We're going to have classes and vehicles and trainings and Q&As and great videos from all sorts of folks in the Overland and Adventure Motorcycle community. So you can just jump on the Overland Expo virtual website and find out all the information. So that's going to be super fun.
Wow. And I want to just address this to the both of you because in all my travels, and I've traveled quite a bit, and of course met an awful lot of moteliers in the last few years. Well, through my career, but especially in the last few years. Very rarely do the moteliers actually have separate careers in addition to operating the motel. The only other example out of the 50 that I did through in my Sleeping Around in America tour was Dave Brenner and his wife Amanda over at the Roadrunner Lodge in Tucumcari. Dave works in Albuquerque, as does Amanda, and then they commute to Tucumcari, and they maintain these other jobs, as he says, to support his motel habit. But it's but how do you guys find juggling your separate careers and managing the motel? Because it's a lot of work. It's 24/7, 365. Tell me how you guys do that.
One of the things about this motel in particular is that since 1936, the owners have always lived on site. So it's a live-work situation.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the things that makes it work so well. I mean, our living room is the lobby of the motel. If people are knocking on the door, we just have to come around the corner. We're either, in the kitchen or in our bedroom or in our offices or something like that. And so our lives are just wide open. You know, if we're out on a motorcycle ride, everybody knows it. If we're working in the backyard, everybody knows that too. And sorry, I thought someone was coming to the door. Yeah, so our lives are just totally ingrained with the motel, and it's pretty much an open book. You know, we practice what we preach. We ride our own rides, and somehow it all just works together really nicely.
Okay,
Plus, I don't
sorry.
really sleep.
Pardon me?
I don't really sleep too much. Sterling is holding down the sleep thing.
Tell me about the. Let's talk a little bit about the motel. I love the fact that you've built it as a motorcyclist motel. Sterling, you mentioned that earlier on. Let's go through, and if you don't mind, just tell me a little bit more about it.
Sure. It was built in 1936 by a gentleman and his family. His name was Jonquil, and hence the name Jonquil, which is a type of a daffodil, so it's a little bit of a play on words. And so it was built in the 1930s right here on historic Highway 80. And we have 7 rooms. 5 of them are around a central courtyard. And then we have another building on the other side of our house that's a 2-bedroom suite. And then where we live is in the house right in the middle. It's a 2-bedroom house. And so we're right in the middle of our motel property. You can come to our house, check in our living room office. And the most unique part of the property is that we have a really big, flat, 1-acre backyard, which is unusual in Bisbee because we're in the mountains and the entire town is built in a canyon. So there's not a lot of flat land around here. But we're working on the backyard, and so far since we've been here, we've built a stage where we do music and performances and shows and events. We set up a bar back there. We have a outdoor barrel sauna, some fire pits, and plenty of room for like overland style camping, motorcycle campers and that kind of thing. So it's more than just a motel. It's like a traveler's oasis where you can get a room or you can camp in the backyard. You might be able to catch some live music, do a sauna, relax on our patios. It's kind of got all of that woven together. And then we're just right down the street from bars and restaurants and all of that stuff.
It sounds beautiful. Are you looking to start planning special events for motorcyclists or motorcycle events? It sounds like it's perfectly set up. It sounds like a really fun thing.
If we weren't in the throes of a pandemic, we would have already had some motorcycle and vehicle events by now. We were looking at doing a BDR film premiere. We had a really cool vintage VW bus gathering that was supposed to be on the calendar, and we had to pull all of our events.
Yeah.
And I'm not actively doing any planning for any pop-up events until I have a clearer vision of what the future is going to hold, because it's really challenging to lay the groundwork for something and then have to, pull the foundation out from under it and shift everything. But we've got a ton of great ideas, ton of cool projects in the works. It's just the question of when they happen is still all up in the air.
Well, I can't wait to get down there and tour around with you guys. It's going to be so much fun, and as soon as we can, I'm going to get down there as soon as possible. It sounds great. Tell me something, guys. One more thing. You have a Facebook page, Sterling, that you were mentioning that you're going to be putting up some videos.
Yeah, on the Jonquil Motel Facebook page and Instagram account. We post there quite frequently. You can go there to learn about the latest happenings at the motel. And I'm working on a new series of videos right now that I'll be starting to upload, all about Bisbee, the town that we live in, why Bisbee, America, is the coolest city, the coolest small town in America, I think.
Well, guys, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm looking forward to be able to catch up with you again soon.
That sounds great. Let's keep the conversation rolling.
Be safe and take care.
Thanks, Andrew.
Looking forward to it too.